Hi, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Christine, and I'm going to be your teacher today for this awesome boho crystallized hat. For those of you who have taken a class with us before, welcome back. For those of you who are new, thanks for joining us today. We're very excited to have you and to go over this fun idea for a cool fall hat. Even though it's the first day of fall, it's still 90 degrees here in Florida. So hopefully we'll be able to wear our fall clothes here soon. All right, so first thing I want to do with everybody is go over kind of our material supplies. You can do as much of this or as little of this as you want. This is just to kind of give you some inspiration to do what you want to do and make it your own. So first things first, if we can go down to, there we are. We're going to need a hat, right? So any color hat will do. In our original post, we did this colorway for our hat. I love it. I think I'm gonna try and wear it as soon as it cools off just a little bit. But just to show you another option you can do, I chose a blue hat, but the colors go really well. And anytime you pick any jewel colors, they always kind of tie in really well together. So even if you did like a mustard yellow hat with the burgundy color, it's still going to go really, really well together. So again, this is just some inspiration. You make it your own. So the color we used here is this kind of purpley burgundy color. It's from Deco Art. And let's see, the actual color name I'm trying to find is Poetic Plum. It's a real pretty, just plum kind of purpley color. And then for the little Southwest design here, we used this blue color. It's folk art color, and it is called Marine Profound, I believe is the name. And then when we did do a little distressing with a dry brush. We just used a basic acrylic white paint, and then we used some of this antique gold rub and buff to kind of give it some antiquing. Next, for our stencil here, we used this stencil from Michaels. It's an Ikat pattern, and it's really pretty. As you can see, we just used 2 of the stencils from this pack, and we just kind of cut them out. And this is what they'll look like once you cut them off your little stencil. And for the embellishment part, you're going to need the Bead Landing Crystal Radiance glue pins. This is a fabulous glue. What makes it even better is the tip of the pin. It really helps to control the amount of glue that comes out. This glue dries clear, but once it hardens, it really, really does secure your crystals very nicely. You're going to need your jewel picker-upper. These are called wax tip jewel setters. They have a bit of some wax on the end, and it really does make it much easier to pick up all your crystals and place them. So I highly recommend getting this. It's not necessary, but it will make it a lot faster and a lot easier and more enjoyable. All right, and then last but not least, we're going to go over our crystals. So the crystals we used on this hat, and I'm going to use them on the blue as well, is the Metallic Sunshine Mix. It's this beautiful kind of topaz-y kind of metallic crystal. It's a beautiful color, Austrian crystal. And if you know anything about Austrian crystal, it's one of the major manufacturers of crystal in all of the world. So this is going to be your SS12, 16, and 20. So there's a mixed pack of sizes here, and you get 60 pieces in this pack. Then we are going to use our 7.5 millimeter flame in a crystal AB, and then our 6 millimeter, I think this is called a drop crystal. These are so pretty once on, and they just give this just the slightest hint of sparkle, and then also it gives some shape to your adornments on your hat. And then we also added a little charm dangle here. So we added this little skirt hook, and then we have our Austrian crystal charm. Oh, we can't really see it there. So we did the topaz color for this brown and burgundy hat. And then today, I think I'm going to use this purple color. So I think it'll go really well with the purple in the hat. And then of course, to adorn the hat band, we've got some chain, we've got some ribbons, and we've got some little flower picks, all from Michael's. There's a lot to choose from right now, so I'll really go in there and just kind of look around and see. But you can also add any other type of embellishments you want. I've seen people do like playing cards, patches, matchsticks. So there's really anything if you want to just add something special in there, just to make it, to zhuzh it up a little bit. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So since we only have an hour time frame, I went ahead and painted this halfway mark, but I'm going to show you how to do that just really quick. You're going to need some painter's tape. And all I did was just, I didn't even measure. I just kind of eyeballed it. I knew I wanted something kind of off center. So I just took my painter's tape and I put the tape along the edge of where I wanted to paint. And I did that all the way across. Then I took my purple paint here, my Poetic Plum, and I just went ahead with a regular old paintbrush and painted it nice and solid. I think I did 2 coats to get this coverage, but it dries really fast, surprisingly. So depending on the kind of coverage you want, you could do 1 coat, you could do 2 coats. And then I took my white paint here with a dry brush. And here, I'll show you this part, because this part, some people get a little intimidating by doing stuff like this. But you're just going to take a little bit of the white and a little bit of the gold. And you're going to take a dry brush. So this is completely dry, right? So I'm just going to dip it in and I'm just going to tap it out on my little paper plate here. So I have a little bit on here, but not much. And then I'm just going to go and paint it on my hat. So I'm just going to do some little brush strokes like that. And it's just going to take a little bit off the paint that I have on my brush. And then you'll do the same thing with that gold color. So you'll just tap it, kind of, you don't want a lot on your brush, you want just a little bit, and then you'll just kind of rub it on like so. And there's no rhyme or reason. We want it distressed, so don't feel like, oh, I messed up, I messed up. No, you did it. This is distressing. This is what we want it to look like, right? So that's all we're doing, okay? So if you want that distressed look, that's kind of how you do it. If you don't want that, that's totally fine too. Again, this is your hat. You make it how you want to make it. All right. So after we did that, we're going to go back and we're going to do our stencil. So the gold here, and I'm sorry, I forgot to put this when I went over all the surfaces, but this is the Craft Smart Multi-Surface Premium Gold Paint Pen. So that is what I used on my stencil here for the center part of the Ikat design. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our stencil here, place it down, and then I'm going to take my gold pen. And I'm just going to go on that center part of my stencil. So hopefully you all can see this while I'm doing it. And it's really, really easy. And just go kind of slow. You just want to do a little bit light. You don't want to press too hard on the gold pen because you don't want a lot to bleed out and bleed through your stencil. But again, if it does, it's not a big deal because we want that kind of rough, scuffed, kind of not imperfect, perfect look, if that makes sense. All right, so now I'm going to do the other side. And it's just kind of like coloring, honestly. The paint flows very nicely from the pen.
Someone asked, does this do okay in the rain or can we spray it with something to protect it?
Yes, you absolutely can. So sometimes when you paint fabric with acrylic paint, it tends to over time kind of crack and spread apart because it is a plastic-based paint. But I did not put anything over this just because I don't plan to wear it in the rain or in the weather. But if that should happen, you can put a acrylic medium over top of your paint once you have your design how you want it before you put the crystals down. So you can do that. Or when you are painting, there's a fabric, let's see. There's a fabric medium that you can mix in with the acrylic paint, and that way it will be protected as you paint it on your surface. So either way you can do that and it will protect it, but just make sure you want something that is clear so that it dries clear, and that should help. But that was a great question. I was prepared for it because I knew it was going to come up. So awesome question. All right, so now that I have my little gold center Ikat design, I'm going to go and put this teal color. So I'm just going to put a little bit of my paint here. And I'm going to get, where did it go? Where did it go? I'm going to get my little paint dauber here. And you're just going to dip it a little bit in the paint. You don't want a lot, you just want a little bit on there, okay? And then I'm going to take my stencil again. I'm going to put it right on top of my gold. Just match it up as best you can. And then you're going to go in and you're going to just start dabbing, okay? We don't want to swipe this because that tends to make the paint bleed under the stencil. So we're just dabbing. You've ever watched Dora the Explorer? Swiper, no swiping. Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm going to move on to the second one here. And again, just dabbing. Just a little bit of paint. You don't want a lot of paint on that little dabber, just a little bit. And you can use a foam brush just the same. You can use a regular paintbrush. Again, you just want to dab it, okay? So again, I'm going to dab my little center mark here. And I know I'm moving really fast through this part. So if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to ask questions at any time. I just know we're on a little bit of a short time frame, and I want to make sure everyone is super clear on what we're doing. Right, moving up to this last little stencil. All right, and I'm going to go and put another second coat over it because the paint does, since this is kind of a felt hat, the paint tends to soak up really fast. So just depending on what kind of coverage you want is how many coats you can do. So I'm going to go back to my first one, just dab right over that. I'm a little jealous for anybody that's in nice weather right now because down here in Florida, we are preparing for a hurricane right now, which is always fun. All right, so now that I have those green little dots, you can see how cute that came out. And again, there's a lot of stencils that come in this pack, and you could use any of them that you wanted. You don't have to use the two that I used. You could use this one here, this kind of chevron design. You could do this like big one and kind of have it going off the hat. But these are the two that I used here, this little stripe here, and then this bigger design here. So again, don't have to feel like you have to follow what I did. Again, make it your own experiment. It's gonna come out great. All right, so for the next part, we are going to do little stencils around this side of the hat, okay? So we'll get started working on that. And for this side, I'm gonna use the purple again. My Poetic Plum is what I'm gonna use. So I'm gonna just put a little bit down. Take another little dabber, and I'm gonna use my little stencil here from that pack. And again, I don't measure anything. I'm really bad. You should probably ask my husband that. But I just kind of like to eyeball it and then go from there. But if you need to measure, that's your thing. I totally get it. I don't. Doesn't make it right. So we're gonna do some more dabbing. So I'm just gonna take my burgundy color and I'm gonna use my same little dabber and just gonna follow this little stencil right on top of it.
We have a few people in the chat that all said to stay safe during the hurricane.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Right, so I'm just kind of moving right along. So I know I'm moving super fast. Does anybody have any questions at all that I can help answer on this part of the process? And again, we're just dabbing the paint over our stencil. And I probably have these about an inch apart from each other. Because what we're gonna do after this is we're gonna go through and then put some crystals on it to really give it some sparkle. So where is everybody watching from? I saw somebody in St. Pete, which is right in our backyard. Is there anybody watching from other spots? Would love to hear from you.
We have someone from Illinois,
Oh, nice.
someone from New Jersey, someone from Berkeley, California.
Oh, nice. Wow, thanks for joining us.
We have someone from Poland.
Wow, all the way from Poland. That is amazing. All right, and as you can see, I'm just making my way along the edge. I'm kind of just using this stitch line as my guide. And as you can see, I mean, it goes pretty fast. And it, again, this paint dries fairly quickly, which is nice. We got these hats off of Amazon. They had a bunch of different ones you can choose from. They weren't very expensive. I want to say they were probably $17 a piece, if that. They had a bunch of colors to choose from.
Chloe in the chat said, love your classes.
Ah, thank you, Chloe. So you must have taken some of our other classes then. Welcome back.
Yep, she said several classes.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you for joining us again. Get a bit more paint. And then we're just about done with the painting part anyway. Then we can move into the fun part, which is adding all of our goodies. Is there anyone making the hat along with us? I know sometimes people, a lot of times I should say, people like to watch first and then kind of go back and rewatch it and then make it, which I would totally do myself. So, all right. So now that we have our little Aztec designs here, Ikat designs, excuse me, along the edge here, I went back with my metallic gold pen and I just made a line down where that paint split with the color of the hat. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do now. I'm just going to do that with our gold paint pen here. Get that out of the way. And again, I'm just using that line as my guide. I just love these colors together. I think they look so pretty together. So it's easier to see. We might have to go over this part a few times just because the metallic paint pen goes easier on the painted surface as opposed to the felt surface.
Someone said, I love your color choices on both hats. Can think of several outfits to wear both with.
Awesome, good. Yeah, I'm so glad you like them. Like I said, any of the jewel tones really tie together. So even if you kind of switched up the colors, if you kept it all in that jewel tone family, they would all really work well together. So, all right, so now, see, that was super easy. We just drew our gold with our metallic paint pen, just followed along that line. Now we're gonna go ahead and start adding our crystals. So again, these are the 12, 16, and 20. We use the metallic sunshine pack, which is a beautiful, beautiful kind of metallic-y topaz color. I don't know if you can see, but it's probably one of my favorites besides, you know, the Crystal AB, but got a beautiful color to it and really ties in well with these jewel tone colors that we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and open this pack up and then dump them into my little triangle trays. And these triangle trays come with your glue pen, which makes it really easy to shake your flatbacks so they flip over for you. Right. And then I'll go ahead and open up my shapes here. And again, I'm using the Crystal AB Flame shape and then the Crystal AB Drop. It's kind of like a skinny teardrop shape. So we'll go ahead and open those up. Get those in our trays. And that will make it a little bit easier for us when we go to place our on top of the glue. So two, I love wearing hats. I don't get to wear a whole lot of them here in Florida, but I do wear them every chance I get. But they're great. Like these would be great if you're doing like fall photos, fall family photos. We're going to like a fall festival or a pumpkin patch. Like, I can just think of a million places we could wear these. Okay, so now we're going to go back and we're going to start gluing down our crystals. So using our other hat as a guide, we basically just did the crystals on the front side of the little ones we stenciled, and then we have them placed kind of on the whole side of our painted side of the hat. And then we also did a few down the center of our gold line, and then we did just kind of a line of crystals going across the top of the hat. All right. So let's start by doing our crystals here first. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a teardrop crystal, and we want to just put a little dab of glue in the front. All right, so this is the front of our hat here. So we're just going to do just a little tiny dot on either side of our Ikat stencil that we did. And then I'm going to take my jewel tip picker upper, which it has disappeared on me. I'll just open a new one. Again, you definitely want to have one of these tools. It's a great tool to have in your little craft arsenal. It really does make picking up your flatbacks much easier. So what you're going to do is you're just going to place the wax tip. You want your crystals right side up, and you're just going to touch it down. And as you can see, your flatback crystal is going to stick right on top of it. So it's going to make it really easy to set it on your little glue dab. All right, so let's use our skinny raindrop to go on our first dab of glue. And we want the larger size to be face down. So we're going to go ahead and put that right on top of our glue dot. And again, like I said earlier, so this glue is going to dry completely clear. So as you can see, I have a little bit of glue showing. The good thing is that's going to dry completely clear, and it's going to kind of make a seal around the crystal so that once that glue has cured completely, it's going to prevent it from having that crystal pop up, which is even better. So on the next little glue dot, I'm going to use a flame crystal, and we're going to do a pattern. We're going to do a skinny raindrop and then a flame crystal, a skinny raindrop and a flame crystal. So we're going to take our glue pen again, and we're just going to do a few more dabs of glue on either side. Okay. So next we're going to do our skinny raindrop, and we're going to place that right on top of our glue dot. And then we're going to go back and get our flame and place it right on top of the alternating glue dot. Okay. And we're just going to do that all the way around. Well, not all the way around. We're going to stop about halfway. And we're gonna do a skinny raindrop, and then we're gonna do a flame. Okay. All right. So we'll do one more skinny flame or skinny raindrop and then one more flame, and that will kind of complete our little pattern on this side of the hat. All right. So next we're going to go and we're going to place a crystal in the center of our little Ikat design that we made on this side of the hat. So I think I'm going to go ahead and use the SS20 size, which the SS20 is the largest size in the pack. So there's a small, medium, and large size that comes in that Crystal Metallic Sunshine pack. So the SS20 is going to be our largest size in that pack. We're going to take our glue pen again, and we're just going to put a dot of glue on each of our little Ikat stencils that we made. And we're going to do that right in the center. Don't need a lot, just a little dab of glue. And we're only going to about halfway on this side of the hat. And then I'm going to go back with my SS20 and I'm going to put those right on top of those glue dots. Does anyone have any questions at all so far? Again, I do apologize for moving so fast during this, but we only get an hour and don't want to take up too much time out of your day.
I have a couple of questions for you. I know they wasn't asked. So quick question, just in case anyone was wondering, how long does it take the paint to dry before you can start using your paint pen or anything else on top of it?
So that's a great question. Luckily, this paint dries really, really fast. So I would say about 20 to 30 minutes and you can start your next step. I mean, we just did this paint here on this little Ikat on this side of the hat and it's already dry. And that was what, 15 minutes ago, if that. So we're already able to place our crystals down. So yeah, so this paint dries really, really quickly. As far as the glue, so the glue does take a bit longer to dry. I would say before wearing it, you really want to wait 24 to 48 hours because you really want that glue to really cure and harden. Once that glue hardens, the crystals aren't coming off. They will start popping off if you don't give it enough time to cure and harden. So that's when you're going to see, you know, crystals popping off here and there. But if you wait the amount of time and let that dry, that glue really dry and harden and cure, you won't have any of those issues. So, but yes, that's a really great question. Any other questions?
I think we're all just loving the process.
Well, good. I'm happy to hear that. All right, so now we're going to move on to this side of our hat. We're going to start by doing a flame crystal on either side of our Ikat design. So we're going to put just a dab of glue here and a dab of glue here. And I'm going to take my jewel setter again. And these are my flame crystals. So I'm going to put one on this side here. And then I'm going to put another one on this side. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and do that on this pattern as well. So we'll move to this center one. We'll do the same process. We're going to put one dab of glue on this side and one dab of glue on that side. And then we're going to place our flame crystals.
I'm not for sure if it was asked, but I remember a little earlier up, someone was asking, they definitely would want to make one for themselves, but if they decided they wanted to start selling these type of hats, what would you say be a great price range?
That's a tough question. It kind of depends on, you know, what you value your time at. What I always tell people is when you buy your materials, you want to basically double that amount, right? So if your materials are costing you, let's say, $20 in material, so automatically you want to at least double that. And then you want to add on time for, you know, your time. How much is your time worth? So that's going to be dependent on your schedules, on, you know, how much time you have, you know, if you're, you know, working full time and then trying to do this on the side. It just depends on how fast, you know, you can make them and how fast you can churn them out. But I always love to buy handmade things. I always gift handmade items, especially around the holidays. It's kind of like my love language. So that would be my best advice. Is just, you really need to think about your material costs and then how much your specific time is worth to you. So that is a really good question to ask. So we're gonna do one more little glue dot on this side, and I lost one of my crystals, so I'm out one crystal, but it dropped somewhere on the floor when I opened the package. But just know you will have enough to do both sides of the package. I'm just clumsy and spill them every time I open a pack of crystals. All right, so now that we have our flame crystals on, we're gonna go ahead and do our skinny teardrop crystal. So we're gonna do a teardrop crystal on the bottom of each of our Ikats. So we'll start here, little drop of glue. And then again, we're gonna do the bigger end of the teardrop facing downward. So we're just gonna put that right on top of our little dab of glue. And again, my glue is kind of smushing out the side. I don't know if you can kind of see that, but don't worry about it. It's going to dry completely clear. And when it does, you won't even see that. We'll do one last one here.
Someone said, thank you so much for replying to that question. I'm fascinated with your talent, the color combinations, and the design. It's a piece of art.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. That's definitely a compliment. I really, really appreciate that so much. And I really appreciate all of y'all's time, especially taking your time out of your busy day to come sit with us and craft with us. It's one of my favorite things to do. So I really appreciate all of y'all coming and sitting down with us. All right, so now we're gonna go in with our metallic sunshine crystals, and we're gonna do a crystal in the center of each of our blue Ikats, and then one in the center. So I believe I used the medium size in the pack for this. Actually, no, I did not. I take that back. I used the smallest size in the pack, which is going to be your SS12 crystal. So again, we're just going to take our glue pen and we're going to put small dabs of glue in the center of each of our small bluish green little Ikat designs. I'm going to take my crystal picker upper again, and I'm going to put those right on top of my glue dots. All right, and then you're gonna do that on each of these designs. And then in the center, I'll show you, let me bring this hat back over. In the center of each of our little Ikat designs, we're gonna do a medium crystal metallic sunshine, which is gonna be the SS16 size. And then we're gonna do a skinny raindrop. So just in the center. Sorry. Not bad. All right, so I'm just gonna do 3 little dabs of glue. So I'm gonna do one here, and one here. All right, and then I'm gonna take my medium, which is the SS16, and I'm going to put that on the 2 outside dots of glue. And then my skinny raindrop, we're just gonna put right in the center here. Okay. And then again, you're gonna do that same part on this centerpiece here. So I wanna show you real quick, we're gonna add some crystals on our gold stripe, and then we'll add a few on this side of the top of our hat. So again, we're just gonna do dots of glue. Because we're leaving space in between the crystals, we just wanna do dots. We don't wanna do a line. So we're gonna take our glue and we're just gonna make little dots along our gold metallic band that we did. And then you can do any size you want here. I think I did the medium size, the SS16 size. And I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna put that right on top of my glue dots. All right, and I'll hold this up so you can kind of see a little bit better. So very simple, but it just adds that touch of brilliance that we need. All right, and then I'm gonna do some going up this part here. So again, just taking my little glue pen, doing glue dots. Okay. And then depending on what size you have left, you can alternate the sizes here if you want. You can use the smaller size. I'm gonna use some of these smaller size up.
Someone said, I missed it. Where did you get your hats? I got 2 from Aldi of all places. Did not go there for that.
Oh my goodness, Aldi, you can find some of the best stuff.
Most random stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, so these actually we bought right off of Amazon. I want to say they weren't very expensive, around $16, $17 at the most. They had a bunch of different colors to choose from, which was kind of nice because I couldn't make up my mind. That's why I got 2 different colors, because I just thought they were so pretty. But heck yeah, Aldi, that's like an Aldi score right there. All right, so this is kind of the basics of how you're gonna add the crystals onto your hat. Again, you don't have to follow what I did. This is just to give you inspiration. If you wanna follow this to the T, awesome. If you wanna add crystals however you want, do that too. And please, when you make your projects, please make sure to post them on social media and with the hashtags, hashtag make it with Michaels, hashtag create with cousin, hashtag cousin DIY. We love to see what you all make. It's kind of one of my favorite things is to see what all people have made after we do the video. But if you don't use those hashtags, we won't be able to see it. So please, 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 if you do post them on any type of social media, please make sure to use those hashtags. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put a few crystals on kind of this top part of this hat here. And again, just gonna do little dots of glue, not gonna do a lot. So let's see, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one more, 6. So I did 6 dots total. And then I'll go back and I'll use the larger size, the SS20 size. And I'll just put those right on top. So we only have about 10 minutes left in our class this afternoon. And I want to make sure if you have any questions at all, that we get those answered for you. So if you have questions, now's the time to speak up. We'd love to get those answered for you. All right. So yeah, that's all we did for that part. We just added those crystals right on top of our glue dots. And again, you'll definitely want to let this cure before wearing it. I'm really bad. I don't follow my own advice. And then I have crystals popping up my stuff that I make. So follow my advice. Wait 24 to 48 hours before actually wearing it. That way you get the most adhesion, thank you, of your crystals onto your hat surface. All right, so last but not least, we're just kind of gonna zhuzh it up a little bit. We're gonna add some ribbon. You can use any ribbon of your choice. These are kind of what I grabbed at my local Michael's. This kind of velvet burgundy ribbon. I've got this kind of cream with some gold studs on it, which I love. And then I grabbed some of these floral picks they have in store right now from the fall section. I just love it. They're so pretty. So we're gonna go ahead and add some of our ribbon. And again, I'm not the best at measuring things, so I just like to kind of eyeball. You're gonna leave a little bit of a tail at the end because you're gonna wanna tie this in a bow. So I always leave a little bit extra. That way you can always just trim it off. But you're just gonna wrap the ribbon around your hat. And we're just kind of gonna play. We're gonna see what looks the best. And then once we decide, how we like it, then we'll go ahead and secure it with our glue gun so that it doesn't move around on us. So I think I'm gonna do this first, and then I'm gonna add some of this pretty velvet burgundy, which really goes well with our burgundy paint color we did. And you're gonna do kind of that same thing. You're just going to wrap it around. You want to leave a little bit extra, not a whole lot of extra on this one, but a little bit extra, right? And then I think I'm going to add this white or this cream with this gold stud just to kind of give it a little bit more bling. I love my bling. Okay. A little extra there. All right, so this is kind of how it's looking right now. And I kind of like this. I like this with the, oops, sorry, you can't really see that, can you? I'm really loving how the gold kind of reflects off this blue, and then it's got the metallic gold crystal. I'm really loving that. So I think we'll go ahead and keep that. So I'm gonna go ahead and start gluing down my pieces here. So we'll start with the first layer of ribbon. We're just gonna take our glue gun, add a little dab of glue onto the side of the ribbon, press that down. We're gonna do a dab of glue on this side. Okay. And then we'll do another kind of small dab of glue on this inside over here. Okay. And we're gonna basically do the same thing with our second ribbon. So we're going to kind of just overlap it a little bit from the first ribbon. So we're gonna put our little dab of glue right there on the edge there. And then we're gonna swing to the other side here. And we're gonna do another dab of glue on this side. And then we'll do the same thing again on this side. And I think I'm gonna trim this little bit of excess off here. And we're gonna do that same process with our last ribbon here. Now I added this poppy chain on top of that as well. You don't have to do that, but again, it just kind of gives it that little extra bling. If you're like me, I love extra, I love lots of bling, I love being extra. But again, you make it your own. This is just to kind of give you some ideas of what you can do with all of these supplies and how you can make it your own. Right, so I'm gonna trim this extra off, and then we're gonna do some glue down here. And then with your tails that you left here, we're gonna just tie a bow. It's gonna be a messy bow. This is a boho hat, so it doesn't have to be perfect. As my mom always taught me, you have to make the bunny ears. All right, so we're just gonna tie that like so. And you can kind of fluff your ribbon out depending on how you want it to look. All right, so now really quickly, you can take any of your like fabric, or not fabric, your flower picks that you want. So you can do as many as you want or as little as you want. And then you're just kind of gonna stuff those in to the side of your hat. So I did quite a few on this one. You don't have to do as many, but I just stuffed them right in between where we made our bow. I put a little dab of glue so that they don't come out. And then again, you can add some chain if you want. We did some embroidery thread throughout just to kind of give it a little bit of extra messiness. We did kind of a cross stitch here. So again, these are just kind of ideas that you can do to make your hat your own. You don't have to follow this exactly, but I really do hope that when you're making your hats, you will post them so that we can see all of your fun and great work. And then remember, if you do post them on social media, if you can please use the hashtag Make It With Michaels, Create With Cousin, and Cousin DIY. We would really love to see what all you make. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm so happy to have taught you this, and I hope everyone enjoyed the class, and keep calm and sparkle on. Bye.